So yeah, I'm going to talk briefly-ish about our journey to try and standardise on one manifest to rule them all. Now, this will not be the most technical talk of the day, but I will warn there are a couple of caveats where Will gets called out again. So I think we should have done two things and maybe some feedback for next year. Every time Will Law's mentioned, we should have caffeine drinks out there and do some shots. Play a bit of bingo, or anytime Big Buck Bunny's shown. So I think that's future events. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the CMAF dream and where that came from. It's been around for quite a while now, so we don't need to dwell on that too much, and then kind of go into our goals and the progress we're making and what we think is next. So who am I? We've already said this, so you might recognise me from Sid Video, the largest video tech meetup in the world. I've been organising that with Jeremy since 2016. I've been working in streaming since 2006, but always kind of on the delivery side. So I've always been taking the tech once it's a few years old and it's kind of mature enough to push out into the wild. I now work in video delivery on one of the major Aussie sports streaming platforms, covering English Premier League football, which is always randomly in the middle of the night for us. And because we gave away my Sid Video introduction earlier, there's a fun fact on me. When I'm not doing video stuff, I like to take on random projects like build camper vans and things. So if anybody's interested in #vanlife, come and chat to me later. CMAF, so one format to rule them all. When I Googled CMAF, this came up, one format to rule them all. I thought, hey, that's so cool. This has probably been presented at previous Demuxed. As I said, it's been around for a while, but here's a very brief overview, right? So finally, encoding and origin and packaging, CDN workflows can rejoice. We can share, we no longer have to produce TS, HLS and fragmented MP4. We can share those same common segments, and well, that's it, right? Fixes everything. You know, you kind of search a bit more, and the guys at Axonom state that CMAF brings high efficiency, theoretically saving 70% of the encoding, packaging, and storage costs. Now, as a business, you're kind of seeing 70% cost savings. That's dramatic, particularly at scale. So I put together kind of a brief checklist for fun. What are the sort of simple things, top 5 things that we care about, and kind of a mix of some business and an odd personal objective up there. And yeah, that's really like let's not dismiss the fact that simplifying our upstream workflows is super important, and kind of saving on all those things, those commodity costs that do massively grow as you're trying to deliver content. But for everything else, we do still need 2 manifests, and we do have to be able to continue to support HLS and Dash in order to kind of meet those DRM requirements. Server-side ad insertion requires multi-period Dash, and then kind of when you get to the playback end, there's still an awful lot of complexity. So what does that look like in a typical video pipeline? We have one format, but 2 manifests. How bad can it be? So we're going to look at our humble 3-second video segment, or actually it's 3.84 seconds to better align with the video-audio nuances that Alex was talking about in his presentation earlier. So we have our source, and we have a couple of encoders, primary and DR, and then we have like another layer of backup because we like backups. So we're on to 4 instances of that 3-second video segment. We throw in our origins, and again, primary, DR, and all the right failover things in place there, and we're up to 10. Add in our manifests, and a slight caveat here, time we add a harvest stream and we add Scuddy and non-Scuddy versions, we're up to 4 manifests rather than 2, so we're on 24 instances of that segment. Throw in the CDNs, we've got a multi-CDN workflow that we're dealing with, and we're up to 240. Go beyond this, try and count renditions and channels, and I was never that great at maths, so this is about as far as I got. So we have one format to rule them all, but when you kind of scale it out and look at what that looks like, it's actually a lot more than that. And here we go, drink. This is your first cue to drink. So Will called this out in 2016. I was kind of searching for past history and things, and of course came across his name. And rightly so pointed out that, this is great, but there are still going to be many legacy devices. There is still the issue with DRM, that as soon as you actually try and implement this thing, you can't get away from the fact that you do need to still serve both manifests. So yeah, this is kind of exactly what he was getting at there. If we look at the common encryption support, the elephant in the room was always our dear friends at Apple and the Fair Play DRM that wouldn't work with common encryption. So let's fast forward to today, and we have a newish kid on the block, I guess. The CBCS DRM, which was more an Apple standard that has been adopted in the Widevine and the Play-Ready specs. So hey, where does this get us, right? Well, we're not getting away from DRM. Fairplay is only going to work with the one format. So could we really look at HLS CMAF and focus on one manifest there to rule them all? So a couple of caveats in terms of why this in particular is good for us. We're based in Australia. Our content rights are exclusive to Australia. Apple has a huge penetration in that market. This is data that was collected last year from Statistica. 55% of mobile operating systems are on iOS, and as I mentioned, a lot of our content is at 1 a.m. and the mobile screen is very useful at that time of the morning when you're trying to watch your football and also not wake your partner up. So that kind of gives us a head start if we're actually going to try rolling this out. And there are a few other places where standardizing on HLS is particularly helpful in our scenario. So I've put a hands up if you disagree. I kind of probably know in this room don't actually want hands up to try and debate this at this stage. But from our perspective, we find HLS manifests much easier to debug. They kind of generally, they roll things out and it works on the iPhone, yay, mostly. We also find that we can train our ops teams. So we have ops teams that kind of run 24/7, and we can actually train them to read those HLS manifests pretty quickly, pretty easily when it comes to debugging things. And the more we can train them, the less we get the phone calls in the middle of the night going, hey, this isn't working. It's also easier for programmatic monitoring to read. So kind of just based on those high-level simplification factors, it makes sense for us. So if we do this, our complexity can be reduced. We're down to 16 streams per channel instead of 24. It's still a lot, but it kind of cuts our outputs by a third. And if you're always kind of thinking about how you optimize and you trim what you're delivering, there's room then when the inevitable happens, there's a new standard, something new you've got to try, and you do need to expand again whilst you're kind of trying to cater for that kind of lower tier of long-tailed devices. We also see a lot of problems with cache poisoning on our CDN. So we own a CDN, and we have a lot of problems with cracked versions of Widevine or old versions of Chrome where they're kind of requesting those dash segments ahead of time, and then the 404 gets cached, and that kind of presents a problem for our legitimate streams as well. And hey, do you know what is a cheat's way out of that one? So this all sounds great so far, but kind of where are the gotchas? So I just picked 3 kind of random things that we've come across recently with this, or not so recently. The one I really wanted to focus on, though, is the business support. Why? Because when you're going to try and roll something out like this in a big organization, there's investment. There's an investment in your time and your resources of your staff. Like, how do you convince the business that rolling out something like HLS CMAF, they'll be like, what? How is that worthwhile? So kind of think about what are they interested in? Customer satisfaction, always, right? Nobody likes a low NPS score, and when you're part of a telco, that's key. Customers always demand higher quality. Do they really know what it means? Debatable. But if their TV supports 8K, they want 8K, right? Delivery costs for the business need to remain sustainable, and we need to very much factor in major event scale. We spend so much time planning and being aware of that kind of odd 1% of time when we're delivering that major event, and then you end up running BAU kind of on the basis of the modeling that's been done for your one-offs. So here he is again. For us, owning the network and And having to factor in that major event scale does provide us with kind of some greater visibility. With great power comes great responsibility. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse in many ways because they can see the impact that the traffic has on our network in general. And it provides some insights for that capacity planning. So we thought, okay, one thing we could do here is add in, we're doing a bunch of work anyway, let's add in a new codec because we can sell a dream to the business using HEVC in this case. Yes, there are other codecs out there. I think I've got Will up here because he did point out that HEVC is still around. It's not going anywhere. Yes, we've been talking about HEVC for what feels like 72 years, but it was something that felt like it could be low-hanging fruit, supported by the encoder, now supported by a lot of players. Let's give it a go. So we have a solution. It came with some fun that we learned along the way. The mixed hardware support, so the encoders, encoding HEVC is more complex, so we had to be careful. You kind of look at the Apple spec and it's like, hey, let's just duplicate all your renditions and you serve everything at H.264 and everything at HEVC and happy days, but the encoding hardware, I can guarantee, does not like that. And we're still trying to save the business money and we don't want to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on additional encoding kit. So you see, we've landed here with 2 HEVC renditions in the ladder. Why? Because we tried just one at the top for the 1080p and thought maybe that'll be easy, limit the support. And good old Apple themselves, you'd find weird versions of Safari running on Big Sur that would not rendition switch into an HEVC rendition when there was one present. You add 2, bingo, works. Don't ask me why, but just random lessons learned. Outside of that, we were kind of a bit surprised about what we found next. We kind of went out then to, threw in Android and web and just thought, we'll see what happens here. And crazily, there was no HEVC, no problem. And device support across that core platform set was good. Android surprised us, as did Chrome. And a lot of Android does support HEVC pretty well now. Great. On other platforms where HEVC wasn't supported, it just ignored it. Present it in the manifest, the device goes, I don't know what you are, ignore you, I'll happily play everything else. But alas, you branch out a bit further, as we all know, not all devices are created equal. I mentioned before, in Australia, we're lucky in terms of the fact that our cross-section of devices that we're supporting is comparatively small compared to some of the rest of the world, but we're not that lucky. We still have some of the dear friends in this mix. So what else did we learn here? Some of those devices will declare in their docs that they support HEVC, but actually are just not happy bunnies if you do just present them with the mixed manifest. So we added a 3rd HEVC rendition to our ladder and found that if you kind of explicitly declare to that device, I want you to prefer this codec, it will. So we could start making decisions like when we put rendition pickers in, maybe a certain selection selects the HEVC manifest versus the AVC manifest. Some of this is still progressing and we're still learning some of the stuff here, but just some random hints and tricks that we learn along the way. So we have a win, right? We've introduced a new codec, HEVC. We've been able to increase the quality of our streams for our consumers using codecs to kind of avoid having to increase our bit rates substantially to do that. So lower delivery costs, better quality, and not too upsetting for anybody that's really worried about that kind of 1% of the time where we'll deliver something that's massive. Yay for codecs, and yay for being able to branch out from H.264, despite the fact that there are many, many other options now, and we've been talking about them for a while. So yeah, the further point then, I guess, that I kind of called out a couple is still browser support progressing, there's still packager support progressing across all of the mainstream packages. Yes, we've been talking about these concepts for years. Yes, Will called out in 2016, these were the problems we were going to have, but we are now at the point where we are getting closer and closer every day to ironing out the kinks in these plans that we're coming across. And we're not asking for things that are still stuck on a long-term roadmap that may be addressed in Q4 24 because we're still waiting for other parts of the ecosystem, the DRM systems and everything to catch up so that the packages can implement everything how they need to. So yeah, all the tech stacks that we're finding now are telling us, so our vendors are telling us that we're quite advanced in terms of what we're doing, but at the same time, it's not new for them anymore, and they do have a roadmap and a plan to adopt things soon and fix things as they come up. So all this in mind, does that mean it now works everywhere? Nope. So this is kind of, again, where a lot of what I do is spend a lot of time kind of translating between the tech team and the business. So this is where I'd go back and try and keep the business excited, because you can then start kind of engaging them. They're already engaged. They're getting better quality. They see a win in terms of what they're able to deliver, higher NPS score, 8K, yay. But once you're dealing with the trade-offs, you can kind of talk to them about the cost and the complexity of maintaining some of those old platforms, versus kind of the new features and the ROI you can get in terms of what you're delivering. And if you're standardizing with ad insertion, for example, you see far less errors, you get better fill, right, on the devices where things are working happily. But yeah, it's important, keep those conversations going and get your business and your ad ops teams on side. And think about, where can we compromise? Perhaps what we're not saying is we want to turn off device support for those devices altogether. What if what we're saying is, hey, those customers can still watch their football game. Are they going to get 1080p? Are they going to get UHD? Probably not. But when they ask why, it's a much easier conversation to say, you can watch the stream, but hey, if you spend $59 and update to the new Google Cast, you can get all of these fun features, but your 2014 TV is just not going to keep up. Where we're at right now is so we focus a lot on the 2018 plus devices as kind of our core. This is our premium set that would get everything, all the bells and whistles. And we have line of sight to about 80% penetration across these newer streams. So go back to our checklist in terms of where we're at. We've simplified our upstream workflows. We can support ads seamlessly. I need many stars against this, actually. I should have added those in, caveats. We can support the latest in streaming security. Again, we're demanded by our content owners to make sure that everything we're doing is using the latest and greatest in DRM standards. And we've got the business on board, so just one left. Where are we going next with this? Well, we see the HLS interstitial spec as being something that's pretty cool, and we're actually pretty excited about it. And hey, if we're standardizing and that's where our ad serving is kind of focused, is kind of in that HLS subset, back to the story. One manifest to rule them all. The interstitial content now lives inside of the manifest in this spec. It saves us having to worry about loading a bunch of supplementary site code in the apps. And when I was chatting to I was kind of running through this presentation with one of the guys on our team, and he went, oh my God, a manifest within a manifest. That is so cool. So how does Pantos put this? Apple's adding high-level interstitial playback to support HLS, reduces the complexity of deploying ad-supported content, supports advanced ad experiences, enforces navigation restrictions, all very cool. The spec is linked there. For us, how do we see it? Again, selling back to the business, we can implement a consistent user experience across our apps. So colors, scrubbing, just that general ad experience in general. Why the hell can I scrub my ads on AirPlay and I can't do them here? And all of that sort of stuff where you end up trying to address it on a device-by-device basis. Hey, this is a lot of simplification. And again, bring it back to the user experience, and the business can really kind of get behind some of that stuff. We look at content time versus playback time. Some of this stuff is really, really important when reporting. The interstitial spec, in theory, will help remove the need to do a lot of the maths around that, particularly when you're kind of trying to factor in scrub events and all that wild user behavior when they don't actually want to watch the ads, and you don't give them the skip ad button, so they're trying to get away from them anyway. We've got no need to build APIs to poll clocks constantly and all of those sorts of things. So now this is the real bit, right, that you've all been waiting for since the start. Will it get us here? Will it make millions of dollars so that we can all retire early? Pretty unlikely, but no. But we will have some fun in the process, despite the fact that we are implementing tech that is, it's been around for a while, we've been discussing it for a while, but hey, it's still fun, even if you have to wait a few years for it to be ready for prime time. That's it.